of it. I think one of the things happening post-COVID for sure is we went from not having as much to do and many places to go. I wouldn't say we didn't have as much to do, but as many places to go to I got to be everywhere and pinning people down to one location, one event has been particularly difficult, and I don't know if that's been true for you, but how we're getting people engaged. So that's interesting. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, your expertise, and just what are diversity trends right now, you know, for businesses. And obviously her corner is concerned with women entrepreneurs, but just in general because of the climate and their clients. You have any thoughts on that?
Lots of it. So are we on now?
Yeah, I mean, we're
recording.
they're recording, they're
Okay,
whatever. We're
okay.
just talking, and,
All right.
and we'll, you know, cut in and out of whatever.
Okay.
So we don't have to really think about the fact that we're
cool.
on. Yeah.
All right, so some of the trends that I am seeing with entrepreneurs, and then the trends that I'm seeing with leadership. Okay, so let's start with entrepreneurship trends when it comes. When it comes to diversity. Many of them are excited about the idea of the need to diversify. They're excited about it. They get obviously stonewalled by how do I do that when we're in a labor shortage?
Fair.
So when you have issues of labor shortages and the need or want or desire to diversify, they're stuck at the idea of, okay, what or how do I do this, right? The other thing is that they're doing trending wise is not considering the clients that they serve and what type of diversity is needed as a reflection of the clients that you serve. So for instance, if your core clients have a very diverse portfolio, meaning from the top executive leadership all the way to the bottom, then you should in some ways look for ways to include that representation within your organization. So trending is, how do I reflect my clients, and also how do I find talent that's diverse, knowing that there's a labor shortage?
I think I totally agree, because our membership base has had challenges in particular where there's a shortage, but the talent to match the position that is needed. So historically, because it hasn't been that diverse, they may lack that particular experience, or at least the title for that experience. A lot of people have done a lot of the work that is required that, you know, is on, like I've done that, but then when you get to that title or education requirement, we're missing that because we haven't had exposure to the internships or the, you know, the titles that come with those positions. They've been doing the work, but not having the title and the recognition for it. So there's this delta or a vacuum, a void, shall we say, in the market of how do you shift through and get, because they can't even get to the interview, right? Because if you kind of get pushed out if you don't have those requirements.
But that's the part of your hiring team. Like, what are you, when you're writing your position descriptions, that's level one.
Right.
After that, and you're talking about candidate selection, level two is being able to sift through some key words that are a part of, that don't show the title representation, but what keywords are you know, skill sets, your skillables. So when you look at the skills and you look at your needs, there are keywords that are embedded in those descriptions within the resume that still meet the need, but we are traditionally programmed to just look at education and work titles, because that comes with, you know, so if someone gave you that title, that must mean that you were amazing at what you did. That's not necessarily true anymore, especially in the day where we were, especially a couple decades ago, we were highly what we call title heavy, and most people didn't even live up to those titles.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah, so removing maybe that education requirement or just saying it as a plus would be a way for entrepreneurs to open up their candidate base and select, you know, to get more, because you definitely are going to put the keywords, but understanding that that education requirement doesn't mean that you are reducing your standards for what you want
Absolutely
at all.
not.
It's just making sure that you can get to the people that potentially have that experience to help you. Okay.
I would also add that if you look at tech spaces, which are really leading in this space of not needing to look at degrees to qualify talent and expertise. If you're looking at those systems in those organizations and the model that they're using, that is exactly what they're doing. They're testing differently into, can you code, can you do these things, and if so, by passing that test, doesn't matter if you're degreed, doesn't matter if you are accomplished in these traditional ways. They're creating filters that will allow people who would typically be traditionally overlooked an opportunity based on measuring their skill set. So they are doing that. If we follow that trend, then it'll allow us to say, okay, what can I introduce into my interview process and my candidate selection process that will allow me to find that talent that has been traditionally overlooked, to allow them opportunities to showcase. So what can I do to measure that skill? And that's very creative, and that's what's happening now.
And it's a small step that you can take, because I think some people are like, how do I, open myself up for diverse candidates? How do I do it? I think I'm doing all the right things, but that's a small tweak that can be made to help people to do so. And then I think from a leadership perspective, as you were talking about that, one, you're taking a step as a leader to say that your organization will look at things differently. That in itself is diversity, right?
That's right.
But any other trends you might think of or see from a leadership perspective in diversity?
One of the things that you just said that brought a thought to mind is when we talk about representation, right? Now, when you make steps towards diversifying, there are multiple areas that you can consider. So there's race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, and the list can go on. You could even be so diverse when you're considering, I'm going to work with someone that is, a single parent, because, there's typically some challenges, obviously, in what we call level 2 diversity. So you have level 1 diversity, which is things that are visible, and then you have level 2 diversity, which is the invisible, that are still very much important, like culture and where people come from. They may physically look like they're from your represented community, but identity-wise, but if you go to level 2, you find out they're not. Culturally, they're completely different from you. So level 2 diversity is just as important, because that's belief systems, culture, education. There's a lot of level 2 that's overlooked. And so comfort would say, I'm going to look at level 1. You look like we'll be okay.
You look like what
and
I
you
need,
sound like we get along, because we have similar interests, or you have great education. But level 2 will find that there will be a molt between the two of us. Once I realize that I really don't like your lifestyle.
I don't think that's going to work out.
It's not going to work out. And that's when, after we say, that was a bad hire. Oh my God, I missed that.
Was it a bad hire or bad research on our part, and being thorough to do that? That's where personality tests come in. And to your point, leading in diversity does not mean, it's not just about how you recruit. It's how you choose.
It's how you select.
And how you select who's going to be in a part of that culture and that mix for your corporation.
What is your culture? What is your organizational culture? So if you know what matters to you as the owner of this company, so these are the things that I would consider my vision and mission. And within the vision and mission are my values, right? So you think that, my company's values are different from my values as a leader. Not so. My personal values and professional values are very much embedded inside of my mission statement, my vision statement. Now, if you have an organizational vision and mission that does not include any values, then you're already missing the boat, because what you're going to have is unwritten rules regarding that organizational culture.
Absolutely.
So it's not easy for anyone that works for you to know, what do you respect and value? And if it's not written, then I'm going to have free will to determine that for myself.
Right.
And test it and get it wrong when you get mad at me.
Right. Well, no, but that's huge, because as founders, and what we want to communicate to our founders, I think, is that one of those groundworks, and everybody's like, my vision statement, my mission statement, and they kind of kick and scream about getting that out. And I'm always going back to people, what's your value proposition? What are you doing? Getting it out of your head onto paper, SOPs and manuals, because it is those fundamentals that you can always come back to. And if people understand what I like to say, your mood board, people have vision boards, but I like to say mood board of what do you want people to feel like when they're in your company, right? What do you want people to feel like when they receive the customer service from you, you know, and all of your people, right? You cannot be everywhere. So if you're talking about scaling, growing your business, you've got to make sure that those values are somewhere planted. And then I tell people all the time, when you get off track or feel like everybody's in disarray, have you brought your team together and had a staff meeting? You know, have you brought your team together and gone back and looked at those fundamentals? And then from there, you can see people can have the choice. Would you like to come to our organization or not? You know,
the one thing that I've noticed is a lot of leaders and founders find themselves having ignored their own personal values first. So what they do is they go straight in, they look at this baby called the company, and they're like, these are your values. And I'm going to just tell you what your values are, because this is a new image and this is a new way of you're going to be. Without realizing that you're denying the opportunity to put your personal, your stamp, your thread, your fingerprints on that, so that people get to know it, because you're going to lead according to your own personal values. And if you don't start with yourself first, asking yourself those key questions first, like what are my likes, what are my dislikes, what are my non-negotiables, what am I willing to do and not do, what are the types of things that I'll tolerate and not tolerate, that is the beginning of your belief systems as well as your value structure that needs to be written in some way within that statement.
Fair. And also because people have to know you, to like you, to do business with you, right?
Love it.
And so if they know by you know, letting that be known, and you have to be authentic, because if you are trying to appease everybody, that's not going to work out.
Never.
It's just never going to work out.
It's not.
And I tell people, you know, people have choices if they want to work with you or not, but they certainly can't know if you're not authentic and showing them this is who I am and this is what the company is. And then everybody's adults, hopefully, and you can make, I tell people all the time, this is a business, not a school. I'm not here to raise you. I'm here to teach you how to get these services done. This is her corner, or this is Star Enterprises. If you want, you can do your corner. You can do your enterprises. And that's totally fine.
Right.
It's enough to go around. But in here, this is what we believe in, and this is what we're going to do. All right,
so now let me introduce the conflict where employees who work with you, right?
Yep.
If you have not presented your standards, your values, your non-negotiables, and I meet you and I come to work for you, we're going to be in conflict as soon as I do something that disrupts your value system. As soon as that happens, because it's unwritten at this point. But you and I will be in conflict because it hasn't been made clear to me what I need to do to meet your personal goals, right? As an employee. Now, today we're finding out more and more that employees have an expectation. They're expecting leaders to tell them what they want, when they want it, and how they want it, right? As female founders, there's a need, statistically, there's a need for us to be liked. And when you combine my need to be liked with the need to be honest and transparent about my non-negotiables, they're in conflict. Because sometimes I will bend what I really want and need to meet the need to be liked and accepted.
And so I think a lot of people struggle. I think that's true. But I think they struggle with, am I being flexible, right? Am I being adaptable? Not so much looking at it like they're bending their values, but they're trying to make an environment that's comfortable for employees and an inclusive environment. And so I can see how they could be in conflict, but it's how do we determine, which is where I think coaching comes in with all different types of coaching, but determine the difference between something that is non-negotiable, as you mentioned before. Like there are things that I can bend on for the company, but there are some that I'm not.
Absolutely, but being clear on that is critical. And that's something that in the very beginning, anyone that comes, it's introduced to your workforce, that should be a part of the onboarding conversation. Like, I am extremely flexible leader. I am a leader that I use direct communications. I am very flexible. I'd work long hours, but I don't expect you to work long hours. In fact, the things that matter most to me are family, respect, and personal growth. Now, if those are my 3 values and I'm sharing that with you, and as I'm sharing my leadership style with you, you then are at choice as the employee to say, okay, this still sounds like a place that I can belong. You can also say that I'm going to push you to bring the best out of you because I believe in growing talent as well as, while you're here, you're going to give me the gift of your skills and talents to this company. But I'm also going to challenge you to level up and develop more so that you personally are satisfied, but at the same time, we continue to evolve and can be more innovative within this company. So that exchange, again, I'm leading with my values and my expectations, and you're at choice as an employee. That should happen at the interview.
Right. No,
right?
Absolutely.
Right.
And our interview process, it has been historically in companies that I've driven those processes, and why companies I think that are successful that have like probationary periods, for example, I say to them all the time, this first 30 days, you have an opportunity to show me that you are who you say you are, and I have an opportunity to show you that I am who I say I am, and
Love
the
it.
company is that what it is. And we can come back together and decide either it works or it doesn't. No harm, no
Absolutely.
foul. But this is an opportunity for us to try this out because it costs so much for me to go through this process. I don't want to keep doing this. Right?
An average of $8,000.
An average of $8,000. And I want to make sure that everybody has, had an opportunity. As much as I'm interviewing you, you're interviewing us, right? The other part that as particularly female founders, we have to be honest about, we say things like, I don't expect you to, work all day, but at some point, maybe I do. Right? Like maybe when we have a particular project or a need that you have to do that, and making those decisions, and us remembering that we sit in a seat that requires a certain amount of extra hours and extra things, and can't expect for people to have that same line of priorities as we do. And so we can't say one thing and then demonstrate another.
Right.
So as we think about just diversity and being inclusive and what that culture needs to be, we have to check ourselves, at times as well on that, to balance that out.
Absolutely. So, it's interesting because when you talk about, upfront conversations, like things that we have to say in the beginning, things that get in the way are those unwritten rules. And I just want to continue to emphasize, whenever a leader is not sharing what truly matters, it leaves room for anyone to dictate how they're going to show up. They're going to then control the outcome versus you. So getting those rules out of out of your head, saying these are things that matter to me, even though it's not written, getting it out of your head and on paper, or having it a reminder again and again while you're meeting, like when you have your weekly staff meetings, when you have your quarterly check-ins, whatever you need to do to restate what matters, what's important, because sometimes it changes. So in the example, as you're saying, there are going to be times where you need to work late. We understand that. But in the beginning, you can say that traditionally we are a 9 to 5 company. However, there will be times where you may be called to serve or provide services a lot longer, or after the 6 o'clock hour from time to time. Is there anything that could potentially get in the way of your ability to participate in that? That is their moment. And if they say no, and then when the time comes, it's I can't, then there's a different conversation, because they knew that there were from time to time needs, right? And so then that's the conversation where you have, and I always tell leaders this, you can't go to human resources and say, this employee is not living up to their, my expectations. They said they were going to do this, and they're not doing it, X, Y, and Z. HR will say, where's the evidence of that?
Hey, you took the thought out of my head, because I guess I've earned my stripes and being a boss some time, and I had to put that on paper.
Yes.
Like that we had this conversation, right? It's not even about an evaluation, which we do, and that's a point to check in on that, but just here's what we went through in orientation, right? To your point in the onboarding process, and we had this conversation, and in your job description, it clearly states, here are your hours, potentially there may be these days, so that when you say, I don't remember that, because you get so much information in the onboarding process, all of that, we need to review it in your evaluation,
and your files.
and have it in your file, and then be able to come back to it. And it's not a trapping thing at all, it's just accountability.
Absolutely.
Right?
Because it could be a religious holiday.
Fair enough.
And I could absolutely forgot to mention because maybe I was a little stressed from being in front of the boss for the first time. So there are certain things that have to be communicated. And again, these sometimes it's on the side of the leader to ask a series of questions that will prompt that response. And so when you talk about diversity as founders, you're thinking about all the elements, like in the interviewing process, what do you need to add as far as series of questions that will allow you to get the level 2 understanding of this potential candidate, that will allow them to share things that are important. If you have multiple interviews before you make a final decision, then you can add different questions along the interview path instead of knocking them all out at once, right? But yeah, those are the most common, those are the trends we're seeing now. We're seeing the employees in especially larger organizations now running the company because they have so many demands. They want certain things and they want it, they want to have it their way, like it's fast food. So if you want it your way, let's discuss and negotiate what it is that you want. And again, a lot of organizations are now at the mercy of the employee base because the demands are to change culture, shift culture, and leaders are really having a hard time responding to that list of demands. But there's a way to do it.
There's a way to do